All right, all right. Y'all are doing so good with crowd movement. It's really impressive. So this is our last panel of the day before we do our main event, and I think it's a really special one. You're in for a treat, because you're about to hear the turnaround story of Terra Nova and the birth of our international operations for the insurance business. And to me, this is a story that a book should be written about. You've got overnight Concorde flights, you've got a broken hand from someone trying to punch through a wall, and you've got a Lloyd's speech that really shook London to its core. And so I think the folks today that you're going to hear from are the leaders of Markel International, and many of them have been there since the beginning. And to kick this off, we're going to welcome Simon Wilson to the stage. And Simon, for most of you, I think you're all aware now, is the new leader of our global insurance business, but he's been the leader at Markel International for the last 3 years, and he played no small part in driving their recent success. So please join me in welcoming Simon Wilson to the stage.
Hey everybody, welcome. I love this reunion event. I love it so much. And the reason is we can put something on the side of a door that says insurance panel and people come in the room. Now, if you've made a terrible, terrible mistake, I'm afraid the doors are now locked and you cannot get out. So we'll try and make the best of it over the next hour or so. Matt's just referenced a very, very key moment in the history, I guess, of Markel Insurance writ large. 25 years ago, almost to the day, Markel came over from the US. I'm not sure if it was in a Concorde or not. I never got to go in the Concorde, which I'm a bit gutted about, but they came over and they bought a business in London called the Terra Nova. Now, for those historians amongst you, the Terra Nova was a boat that was made famous in 1912, I think. It was the Scots Antarctic exploration. That's the boat that he and his team went down there in. But by the 1940s, that grandeur that it had faded, and it ended up as a burning hulk sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And that is a very apt analogy for what Markel had bought all those 25 years ago. Thankfully, we're still here. I think we're thriving, and our job today is going to be to take you through the story of those past 25 years and just, how we're now set up to go and put Markel on the map over the next 5 to 10 years. It's a really exciting story. What we did as part of this 25th year anniversary was ask a number of people about their experiences of being involved with this organization. And the videos are just a wonderful thing, as we can't show them all to you today. But there was one in particular from Tony Markel, who was the person who hit the wall, and he's still carrying the injuries of a broken hand after some of the issues that he found within Markel. But we asked him what his experience had been with the acquisition of Terra Nova and what he'd seen over those years. And this is Tony's video. This is how he responded.
People ask me, you had a lot of success with the company and so forth. What do you remember the most? What are you the most proud of? And I'll have to say that the ability to hang in with Markel International under a lot of duress and a lot of changes and whatever, and seeing what it is today brings me as much pride as anything I ever did for the company when I was active. At that time, 25 years ago, London and Lloyd's were the entryway into international insurance. Lloyd's was the biggest player in every country in the world, and this was before sort of the proliferation of individual companies in individual countries. The challenges were varied and many. When we brought the Markel style of management there were a lot of people who didn't like it and really rebelled against it, and a lot of them ended up leaving, but we were absolutely dedicated. There are a lot of good ways to run a company. Markel style and our devotion to it is clearly one of them, and we were not going to compromise on what we felt the way to manage people and the company were consistent with the Markel style. So there was a lot of gnashing of teeth, and Lloyd's at the time. We thought Steve, Alan, myself, thought we had a pretty good handle on Lloyd's and what it was all about. But the reality is they had historically accepted very poor underwriting results. And, you know, I think we were somewhat instrumental in creating a lot of change at Lloyd's itself. They asked me to give a speech in the Lloyd's library. That speech and the notoriety that it got, plus a lot of the other initiatives, led to underwriting oversight, a cleanup of the reinsurance that was allowable at Lloyd's, and all the things that I pointed out. I probably got more credit individually than I should have, because there was a movement afoot. Over the last 25 years, the controls have strengthened. The challenge to financially adequate reinsurers, to underwriting controls, oversight of delegated authorities, and all the things that gave us heartburn 25 years, I think are pretty well under control. Markel International has just performed so beautifully that it makes all of the trepidation 25 years ago worth it. The importance of Markel International today to the whole Markel Group continues to increase. And the results that they have produced in the last, particularly 5 to 10 years, have been incredibly gratifying. So my hat's off to where they have taken that business. If you read the style, the fundamental message is the golden rule. I mean, seriously, it's nothing more than an elaboration of the message that's intended into the old do unto others. And it's no less true and important today than it was 61 years ago. Was it 61 years ago that I got out of college and came to the company? Yeah. So anyway, it really is, and you got to live it.
Okay, we're going to be joined on the stage here by a number of my colleagues who really make this business tick. So if you guys want to come out. Tony Markel has just walked into the room, sort of a little bit late for his party, but Tony Markel, everybody. So this is a story with many different eras, and we'll look at those in a moment, but we've got a group of people here who have been around for several of those eras, but why don't you introduce yourselves and the role that you do for Markel and how long you've been with us?
Great. Hello, I am Jo Browning. My role encompasses all things people, brand, communications and marketing. I am based in London and I have been here 23 years.
Hello, my name is Nick Lyon. I have a simpler role. I'm the Chief Underwriting Officer at International. I'm also based in London and I've been at Markel for 28 years.
Yeah, good morning. Frederick Wulff is my name. I'm very grateful to be here today, so thank you very much that you're taking time to spend with us. I am from the wonderful city of Munich in Bavaria, from Germany, so that's a little bit of a disadvantage for me because I'm the only non-English native speaker here, so please forgive me if I'm making any mistakes. I have a wonderful privilege today because I'm running our European insurance business, so that's the right thing that I'm doing today.
Good morning, I'm Andrew McMellin. I'm President of International, based in London, been at Markel 3.5 years, so the youngster amongst the group in terms of Markel years, but in the industry 35 years plus.
So as I say, we're going to look at this in a period of eras over those 25 years. And the best way I could think about that was to look at those who've held the president title over those years. So on the far left, we look at the era of Jeremy Cook, the fix era. Now, when we were putting this slide together, always try to get charts that go up and to the right. Tom tends to like that. Now, what we've got here is a kind of a smile test that goes up and to the right. And Jeremy, I looked at this, I said, come on, surely there's a picture of Jeremy half smile. Apparently, it doesn't exist, this guy, right? But he was the right man for that moment in time. Hard man who was coming in. We talked about the fix. the underwriting of the 1990s within the Lloyd's market and probably preceding that was pretty poor. And as a result of that, there were deficiencies in the reserves. There was a whole load of stuff that needed to be done, both financially, but also culturally. And Jeremy, by all accounts, was the man for that job. It was a short-lived period, that only a couple of years, but I speak to my colleagues and every single one of them has got a Jeremy Cook story. So big fix, which allowed Jerry Albanese, who is kind of smiling, but it's not a real smile, that, is it? He's a little bit nervous on that one. But you know, you've done the big fix, and then the dust needs to settle a little bit. And Jerry was a wonderful man, very calm individual who is able to sort of like just allow the business just to sort of slowly regrow and get its, get its confidence back a little bit. And then William Stovin, who I think, is William in the room today? I saw him earlier. But William Stovin, who is with us and led the business for an extended period of time, his vision was really to take Markel out of London and start putting businesses down around the world, that we could grow as the European Union started to grow, as the Asia-Pacific region started to grow. So he was very much an expansive individual who had a big vision for what we could be. Then there's that bloke who got lucky on the back of that, which would be me, and that's kind of we got ourselves into a really nice position in a kind of the COVID time, 2020, and we were in a position where, as the market conditions improved, we could really press the accelerator pedal and start to move this business to a scale that it hadn't been for a long period of time. And then Andrew's got the luckiest job in the world, sort of like, where are you going to take it from here? And we'll talk
Or
you
the
there.
hardest job to follow, yeah.
So one more slide, really, and this I guess it's quite small for those of you at the back, but really what it demonstrates is, on the left-hand side, that's the growth they've experienced since about 2018. So you've taken a business that was just north of $1 billion back then, combined ratio, so a number under 100, it's like golf, the lower the number, the more profit that comes out. So that business was going at 100 or more combined ratio, so we're losing money back in those days, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But over the last 5 or 6 years, we've kind of grown the business at around 15% a year. But more importantly, the profit has really started to fire through. And last year, we made in excess of $450 million clean underwriting profit for the organization. So I got a new job on the back of that, which was good. More exciting than that, I think, is the map picture. Because over those kind of probably the last 10 to 15 years, we've been slowly finding teams, either by acquisition or bringing people in and leaders in many, many different countries around the world. Frederick is a perfect example of that, but there are many other people. Christian Stobbs, I think, who runs our Asia-Pacific operations, are here. Now, we started those businesses generally quite small, with maybe teams of 5 and 10, but they're now businesses where there's 60, 70, 100 people in those territories. So it feels as though we've scaled it to a level where it can really now take off as a genuine global insurance platform. And you can see the numbers of people that have joined us in that kind of 5-year period, more than doubling in many of the regions and territories in which we trade. So the platform that's been developed and where we stand here today is really, really exciting. But I do want to take us back, because I think Matt Johnson mentioned this is a bit of a turnaround story, and it gives me confidence that, no matter how bad things can get, if you've got the right will, the right desire, and the right culture, you can achieve really great things within a business. So we're here to tell that story. I'm going to ask a question, actually, to the panelists now. And Nick, you were there at the very beginning. What would you describe Terra Nova as? What had Markel bought?
Well, first of all, Simon, I'm going to try and answer this question completely ignoring that Tony and Steve Markel are sitting in the front row here staring at me, and I'm going to pretend they're not there. So Terra Nova was a London market insurance and reinsurance business. It was trying to do about $1 billion at the time. It was writing a huge variety of specialty products, from auto, aviation, marine, energy, property, casualty, satellites, all sorts of stuff. And this business was written across around 15 different business units. And there were so many because actually Terra Nova was the result of a merger that hadn't been completed probably a few years before that. And those 15 units were mostly based in London. There was one up in Leeds in Yorkshire in north of England, and there was one based in Bermuda. And across those 15, I would say some were leaders in their fields, highly respected and very profitable. And I think it's fair to say Some of them were none of those things. And I think, and I probably got this right, I'll look down in a minute and see if they're nodding. I think Tony and Steve knew they had bought a fixer-upper. Maybe, yes, some nods. And they got busy fixing the whole thing up pretty much from day one.
And Tony referenced culture, Joe, not just the financial issues, but some of the issues around culture. How would you describe the culture in those early years of what Markel had found?
It was impossible to describe. I mean, Nick referenced the Terra Nova and the Octavian integration or lack of. The conflict between those teams was palpable. The Christmas parties were an absolute nightmare. And then you think about the London city culture, you know, very buttoned up, pinstripe suits, you know, and in walks individuals from Richmond. You know, the culture jarred, so it was very hard in those early days. And up went the posters in the office on the Markel style. And I can tell you the skepticism about the style was off the charts. So they were days of conflict, and my role in those early days was to clean house. So it was to close offices, exit unprofitable product lines, and that's what I spent 2 years doing. So if you were invited for a cup of coffee at Cafe Nero with me, you knew that you were heading towards the door. So it was an interesting couple of years.
And Nick, you both referenced that, you know, Tony and Steve would be coming over fairly regularly. I've heard a few stories, but are there any that stick out for you from those days?
Well, Tony and Steve and the team came over every quarter, and it was brilliant having them around, to be honest. The Terra Nova management had been pretty invisible. And here was this amazing example of strong, principled leadership being delivered with a sense of humour, which I came to realise was the Markel style. My job was to analyse the reserves every quarter and to deliver the results of that work to the team as they came over. And it's fair to say the first few years of those meetings were not easy. Most of the results were disappointing in terms of the reserves. And what I vividly remember, I was talking to one of our investor guests last night, and he said to me, Nick, did they shoot the messenger? And I'd say very proudly, they never, ever did. They treated me with huge patience, respect, kindness, understanding, and all they really wanted to know was what my analysis meant for the business. The current underwriting, they wanted to make decisions about products and people, which is what they did. And my abiding memory, which I'm reliving this very minute actually, was sitting in front of Steve Markel every quarter for 2 days solid, and just how prepared I had to be, because he would always find the best questions to ask. When everyone else was moving on through the packs, he would stop and say, can we just go back a minute? And I'd go, okay, here we go. And he would dig into the detail. It was phenomenal, but it was also hugely exhilarating as well. And Steve and I had a chat last night, kind of reminisced a little bit, thanked each other for the work we'd done together, and sort of had a quick toast to say we won. You know, we got on top of the reserves, and then we were able to look forward to the next few years.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me in those meetings, so these are very complex kind of financial meetings, really. And when a number was negative, which was, I think, was not a good number, it was in red, and every page was like a sea of blood all over it. So Nick came up with the idea to change the colour red to blue. It didn't really change the results, but it made people feel a bit more calm.
My career at Markel has been based on that genius change. I changed the red to blue, and everybody was a lot happier.
So Joe, I suppose, you know, you could eventually sort of come out the other side, but was there any kind of telling point that you started to notice a turning moment, you know, when we went around a corner?
Yeah, I'd say probably for me it was about 2 years in, so we had done the lion's share of cleaning house. A lot of the big egos had gone, and what was left was that core profitable business, and it really did feel like there were green shoots. You know, I'd only ever intended to stay at Markel for a couple of years, and you put aside the human impact of the changes that we made, but it really, you know, and I learned a lot by doing it, but after about 2 years, it really did feel green shoots, something to build from, and it also felt like quite a startup, didn't it? You know, there was a real sense of we could go somewhere here. And I think a lot of us who were around at the time felt like, oh, this is a story I want to be part of. You really did feel like you were joining a company that believed in legacy. So it was a case of, no, let's stick with this and see where it goes.
Yeah, and I think the 50 top people that were in Markel, there's only 4 of them left or something along those lines. So you survived it through, which is great. Now we go through that fixed time, and there did certainly seem not just culturally, but I think financially as well, we started to do a bit better. And then we mentioned William Stovin earlier, and he comes in about 2008, and I had a meeting with him about 6 months into his tenure. He said, look, I want to start finding companies around the world that we can buy and start to really engage in this vision of taking Markel and making it truly international business, because it wasn't. It was a business in London, it was a small business in Leeds, and there was a guy called Esteban Manzano who is with us now in Madrid. So Esteban got a computer and an office in Madrid and was asked to go build a team over there. But then I came in and I started to meet some people around the world, and one of them was a man called Frederik Wulff in Germany. And Frederick, you're a student of the industry, and I wonder what your sense of Markel was before we started to have a conversation, and really your decision to join and your experience that you've had from that point forward.
Yeah, so I joined Markel in January 2012 after selling my very small MGA that was based in Germany and doing business in Germany to Markel. And obviously prior to that, we had a bit of a period where we got to know each other. And that period started in a very nice restaurant in Munich after Lloyd's of London had actually introduced me to Markel, and I'd never heard about the name. So I was like, listen, I'm an idiot, so I should talk to other people in the market and find out more about Markel before I go see them. And I spoke to quite a few people, and everyone was like, never heard of it, don't know. I was like, I'm not the only idiot, that's good. So I was still thrilled because I was following an old rule of my father who always said, listen, he was in insurance as well. So he basically said, listen, never work with a poor insurer. So I was like, okay, that's good. So I checked out, and obviously Markel qualified. So I was like, there we go, let's go meet. And then I had this remarkable meeting with Simon actually in Munich in a restaurant, very typical German one, with Riesling being served, and 3 topics out of that conversation really stuck with me. It started initially, and I've had other conversations with other London market players, and they all came in and said, yeah, Germany is such a great big market, and in 5 years we're going to write 100 million premium, and here we go. I was like, okay, that's great, because I'm more like the niche guy, and if you want to do 100 million in 5 years, it might be that we go the same way like a lot of your other competitors that come in, do that for 5 years and leave again because the combined ratio is not what you want. So I said, maybe that's not the right thing. And then there was a comment that Simon made in that initial discussion. He said, yeah, Germany's such a great big market, and said, oh, here we go again, the 100 million 5-year story. And it went the other way. He said, yeah, in such a big market, there must be niches that are underserviced by the big players in the market. And I was like, there we go, that's the first interesting one. The second one was the Riesling analogy. Yeah? So we talked about Riesling and the quality of Riesling, and that in the UK, the Riesling you get is really rubbish, and that the Riesling we were drinking is actually very good. And we were kind of like philosophing a little bit about why is that the case and why not. And what happened was we came up with the point that I just said, listen, okay, I mean, we just keep the good stuff for ourselves, and the rubbish we export. So it's pretty simple, yeah? And by the way, that's the same for insurance. So, I mean, we keep the good stuff here, and the stuff that we don't like, we give to London. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. So we went on that. And then came the moment of truth, and that is really the moment of truth, because I said, listen, you're interested in casualty and those kind of lines. They're quite related to legal systems and stuff like that. So there's actually only 2 ways how you can write that type of business in Germany. So you can either write it in occurrence, that's the way how we do it, and I know you don't like that, or option 2, you do not write it at all. And he was like, oh, that's interesting, because, and that was actually a crucial one, because his response was then, but you know what, I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you if I would know that better than you, so I'm here to understand that, and then we can talk about how we as Markel can do that together with you. And that actually did the trick for me, to be honest, and that's why that was a very remarkable conversation for me, because it highlighted 3 major points. The first point was, at Markel, we kind of like identify people that want to lead businesses and want to take responsibility. Then we empower them and trust them, so that they can do what they need to do in their local markets. And then we give them a bit of time, because Rome wasn't built in a day, and businesses are not being built in a day, so they need a bit of time to actually grow a business and make that a success. And that's what I've been very privileged to experience at Markel. And from there on, yeah, we kind of like tried to build it in this entrepreneurial spirit with a fantastic team, And it has been a pleasure since that day. And I'm very grateful for that initial conversation, and I've enjoyed every day since then.
And I remember going out, before I came to you actually in Germany, I spoke to this Lloyd's underwriter, one of the people that Tony was referencing, and he said, the problem, Simon, with German business is it's all terrible. I'm looking at it going, like, Allianz seems to be doing okay, actually, sort of like where they are. You just have to find the right stuff. And you have to, in order to find the right stuff, you've got to find the right person. Anyone wants a Riesling recommendation, that's your man, just right there. Joe, you were really heavily involved in that time as we're building out these various offices, and we're just going a huge amount of pace. What do you feel worked well, and were you worried about anything that we were doing when we were going out to all these different countries?
And it really was a privilege to be part of that phase of buying and building. And you asked me recently, when did I have the most fun at Markel? And that was the time, because you really did feel like this was exciting. But we also made a lot of mistakes. You know, you referenced Spain. We started really small there. We assumed that what worked in the UK would work in Spain. You know, that didn't work. So, you know, we made mistakes there that we've then learned and built on. And you compare that to going to Australia recently, and give huge credit to Andrew and to Christian Stobbs there, the lessons that we learned in the past, you know, we don't make now. So we did the due diligence, thought about the, you know, the competitor landscape, had a brilliant leader who had a market-leading team, knew what products we were going to write, and we went in strong. So, yeah, there were mistakes as we went along, always with a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah, and I suppose just thinking back to those times, you're doing multiple things at the same time, and silly things, I guess, like payroll or something. It's like we've got a London market system, but we've got to get people paid in all these different countries, and there's all these different legal systems and employment contracts and everything. Things that certainly on the commercial side you don't necessarily think, but just the amount of work that's involved in actually going to a new country is quite significant, isn't it? It was a huge time investment and learning, but that's what made every day fun. But again, using the Spain example, you know, we took the UK pension plan and put it into Spain, not realizing that the social security setup in Spain on pension is gold-plated. So, you know, you figure these things out along the way. But again, the trust that Markel has put into us being able to learn and grow such that then you can make sure that Australia is a success from day one. Yeah, but yeah, payroll across the world has been our challenge. And it's so interesting that, you know, you listen to the previous panel for those that were in here, and we were talking about Markel Ventures, and I think that humility to say I don't really understand that particular business, but I can understand people to a degree, and we know what we're looking for when we look for people, and then we do trust them and we do empower them on the back of it. So just because we run insurance, going to those different countries, I think we deploy exactly the same mentality our ventures colleagues do when they're looking for businesses in what we're doing as we go around the world. Now, Andrew, you were working at Catlin, I think, at the time, which was one of our competitors. And you, I suppose you've heard the story about how we developed internationally. I wonder how your experience at Catlin was similar or different from what we're doing here at Markel.
Yeah, and perhaps before I start there, because I mean, people have referenced it. So I knew Markel back in those days through their sort of professional financial lines and a UK international professional financial lines team who are specialists in their field, but who had actually been quite leading from a Lloyd's standpoint and actually set up an office in Leeds, Northern England, because they recognised that there was business that you see in that north of England that wouldn't come to London. And if you empower the leaders and the underwriters to get after that business, then you see a different portfolio that you can add to your London portfolio. And certainly, you know, in my experiences in terms of when I was working at Catlin, was again, it was recognising that sat in London, yeah, you'll see some business and you'll see the complex business, but there's a lot of business out in domestic markets that, you know, clearly, you know, will not come to London and want to do business with the people in their own markets. And if you go out to those markets, and as Frederik's referenced, you know, you pick top talent, you empower that talent, listen to them about their experiences and listen to them about their markets and then allow them to build their business and empower them, then you grow a more diversified business. And certainly that's what Catlin did, and that's what, you know, clearly Markel has done as well and done very successfully.
So everything's going well. It's kind of sort of 2014, 2015. We're growing these international operations. We're having a lot of fun going to the Munich Beer Fest. I mean, do not go to the Munich Beer Fest with Frederick. If he invites you, that is going to go wrong. But it's been great fun. spending time with Esteban in Spain is just it's a pure joy. Canada, we're going out to Singapore, all these different places. It's going great. We're having fun. We're building a business. And then we have something in insurance called a soft market. And that's a miserable thing. That's when prices start to drop fairly quickly. And you have to kind of decide where you're going to go and trade. And truth is, the second half of the teens, so 2016, 17, we started to have problems come back into the book in various places as well. You know, it's a little bit sad because you're going like, we're flying in these international places, but back at home in London, it was a struggle. So, Nick, you know, how did you experience those issues, and how do you felt it impacted Markel back in the day?
Keep coming to me for the fun stuff. Yeah. But yeah, those years were difficult. The market had been softening, as you said. I think the market had lost track of rate adequacy, which is the key thing in what we do. So we had a couple of areas in particular that softened considerably. And then that was all made or exacerbated by the hurricanes, one of which has already been mentioned today. We had Harvey, Irma, and Maria. I think we had a Mexican earthquake as well, which really just made 2017 a really difficult year. And as we went into 2018, I remember March 18, we had an offsite in the Exco to make some serious decisions about remediation. So we made some decisions about people, about product, and kind of rebalanced our book. Lloyd's were quite helpful. Lloyd's ran what they called their Decile 10 process because Lloyd's themselves realised that the London market couldn't sustain that level of low or non-existent profitability. So we made some really good decisions, and I think as we got into the end of 2018, going into 19, we were set much fairer. We had a much better business mix, better people, and we were happier with what we were doing. But that was a tough period.
Any regrets about those big decisions that we made?
No, I think we made them at the right time. You know, we'd given a few classes of business a bit of a chance to remediate, and they couldn't. And we'd looked around the market for better people. We couldn't find them. So we made, decisions pretty quickly, like going back, a few years before, to remediate that book. And I think that really set us up well for going into 19 and onwards.
So, Frederick, London's struggling a bit because we're under pressure. Some of the profitability is under a bit of pressure, but Europe's growing, and it's growing profitably because it's doing that kind of small business that isn't impacted so much by these pricing variations. So how did it feel from your perspective? How did Markel react in the case of our European operations?
Yeah, I mean, it also coincided with a word that I actually plan to never use again in my life, which is Brexit. So we kind of like had the situation where we needed to deal with the market situation in London, which wasn't the same situation for our business in Europe. And at the same time, we had to deal with Brexit. And when I woke up the morning after that Brexit vote, I couldn't believe it. And I think like the whole world, at least in Germany, everybody was shocked. And we were like, okay, what do we do? And I think that and that's also referencing to something you just said, Nick, and I think that's when real Markel strength comes to play, because then we are about decision making. We don't dabble, we don't sit on our hands, we get to work and talk about the issues at hand. And I think that's what we did. And we came back with relatively easy thinking, saying, okay, listen, we want to continue to support our customers in Europe. Tick. Second thing was, okay, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we do the right thing for our customers and that we treat our teams well. So that was basically the setup. And then we went into, okay, what does that mean? And the solution was then, or the plan was then developed relatively quickly to say, okay, let's set up this insurance company in Germany, because Germany is the largest individual insurance market in Europe. And then let's make sure that we have a proper regulator. And I think the German regulator is definitely a proper one. And let's get that going. And then we set up a project team. We empowered the project team. We set up an insurance company, and today we have a specialty insurance company in Europe on the ground with roughly 500 million in premium, over 250 absolutely fantastic associates, and over 200,000 customers. And I think that just shows that good decision making in the moment just led to good results today.
And it was interesting because we chose Germany, and Germany is known as quite a strict regulator, the BaFin. There was a bit of regulatory arbitrage from competitors. He said, well, actually, if we set up in Luxembourg or Ireland or somewhere, it's going to be easier and it's going to be better. Guess what? The Germans have taken control and said, no, everyone's regulations needs to come up to this level. So actually, by going to Germany first, it just got rid of all of the noise around that. So it feels like a good decision made for the right reasons, as you described. Now, but Joe, we're still going through this difficult period, but we were coming back and we've still got these results, and morale starts to be a bit impinged. And we've had to stop doing certain classes of business. People have left. What kept us going through that? Where did the green shoots come from?
The green shoots came from leaders Nick, you referenced, at lines where we weren't doing so well. The common thread was leaders. So, we'd had some turnover in leaders of certain profit lines, and that was the right thing. But again, I'm always the glass half full person, so green shoots, optimism. Where we have been really successful is where we have chosen great leaders. Dave Crozier in Canada. I've seen Neil Galjard somewhere in the back running UK. You pick the right leader who knows their market, and they can get that growth and scale. And Simon, something that you talk about a lot is that talent flywheel of if you bring in the right leader, they then bring in great people, they hold on to great people, they in turn bring in great leaders who then bring in great people, etc. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But actually, if we think back to some of those years where it wasn't going so well, you take out the wrong leader, you put the right leader in, and that's been a lot of our success over the last 5 years.
Yeah, well said. Now, Nick, we come out of that 2017-18 period where it was tough, and we get to 19 and the ship starts to steady. And we're going like, right, 2020 is going to be the year. This is the one. COVID strikes. Talk us through that.
Well, again, Simon, you gave me the soft market question, and now you're giving me, now you're giving me the COVID question. It's a pattern emerging here. So that's right. In, I think, February, March 2020, William Stoven was asked to go and meet the Markel Group board to talk about what had been going on at International. And you and I came over here, and we absolutely smashed it. We gave a great presentation to the Markel Group board about how well we were doing now at International. We'd remediated everything was looking great. Our plans for 2020 were set fair, and we went out and had a very nice dinner as a result, after that. And just as a reminder in terms of how one has to remain humble in this industry, if not in life, by February or sort of March, our dreams had been somewhat shattered because we had COVID. And the first thing we had to do really was to look after our people. That was the most important thing. Make sure people were at home, they were safe and their families. The second thing was to make sure we were still trading, which was important. And then the third thing was to look at our exposures to the actual losses. And as we found that we had a few product lines, event cancellation insurance being the main one, where we were, as we discovered, insuring events, conferences, conventions, a bit like this, all over the US, all of which were shut down. And again, I was being asked about this last night, and I think I was probably the third person in Markel to realize the scale of the problem. I was sent a spreadsheet by somebody one afternoon having asked a load of questions about exclusions, and disease had been excluded, but in some cases it had been written back. Our customers had paid extra, not much, to have that exclusion removed. And I looked at this big spreadsheet, and it was basically a big grid, and it had all the states in the US, A to Z down one side, and had all the months of 2020 across the top. And those of you who use spreadsheets will know what I did. I highlighted March from top to bottom to December. And I looked at the little bottom screen to see what that number was, and it was quite a big number. And I thought, this is a big number. We need to tell somebody about it. So I think I spoke to William, and William, who was excellent at delegating, said, well, would you mind phoning somebody in the US to tell them what's going on? So I did. So I spoke to, I think it was Richie, and had a conversation. And yet again, the response was mostly calm, measured, understanding what happened, what are we going to do about it. And we set about dealing with our reserves. And we worked pretty hard to work out what was going to happen, made a lot of assumptions and guesswork. But the number we put up was actually very solid. And again, I was talking to somebody last night we were reminiscing about how the number we put up then, March 2020, was a bit of an outlier. But I was very proud of the fact that we put up the number that we thought, that we believed in, and others, let's say, it did not. But actually that work put us in very good stead because we could then move on, as the market changed post-2020. Yeah.
I am going to ask you a nicer question later. Don't be a chief underwriting officer, I would say, if those in the audience want sort of a lesson from Nick there. But yeah, you get the tough ones. So you started writing your emails in blue at that point, I think, wasn't it? So I think it's important that you sort of acknowledge some of these things where it has been quite difficult, but we've been quite decisive. Joe, you make a great point around leadership and the correlation between great leaders and great performance. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but finding them is a really important one. But we have had a wonderful 4 or 5 years post-COVID. It's just been remarkable. And I mean, I don't know, Frederick, how that's made you feel and how it makes you feel about the future, but maybe you can just give us a little bit of an insight between kind of that 21 through 25 period and what's that meant to you.
Yeah, and I mean, and obviously the results that we have achieved in Europe, I'm very proud of what the team has done, and I'm very gracious that I was allowed to be part of that. So I think that's obvious. But I mean, you know me, I'm more like the continuous builder. So for me, it's more interesting to kind of think about what's going forward. And I think what's also important is kind of like the gratitude that comes with what we have been allowed to do. Because I mean, without the support from Markel International, without the support from Markel Group, without the trust that we have seen, and without just fantastic colleagues that have done a marvelous job, this wouldn't have been possible. And I think what's also very important, I mean, I could be sitting here for days, basically, and talk about thousands of great stories that have enriched my life in that period of time with great people at Markel. So the gratitude is also something that's incredibly important. But then, I think the biggest feeling when I think about that is the excitement, because the excitement about knowing that we have less than 1% market share in Europe. We have a fantastic setup, fantastic teams, all the support that we can get, a market that now knows us, good news, yeah? So there is no limit. The sky is the limit, and I absolutely see no reason why we shouldn't be able to really double our volume, be highly profitable, and continue to find the right associates that make us as Markel an even better company. So the biggest feeling about the last 5 years is the excitement about the next 5 years. So and I'm really, yeah, I couldn't be more excited about what I see for Markel in Europe in the future.
Yes, and you sense in your voice there, it's just like, this is a group of people who've been together now for quite a long period of time. And we have traveled the world together, and we've been through some hard stuff together, and we've enjoyed times together. So it's kind of like a group of, almost like a group of friends in the best possible way that are building this thing up and have been through an awful lot together. It's a strong dynamic. Joe, any thoughts from you on the past 5 years and what's happening next?
Well, we did a leadership offsite in Spain a couple of weeks ago, and it was wonderful having Tom and Mike join and their support. But for me, that was just the perfect moment in time. So it was celebrating the last 25 years, but again, looking ahead to the next 5 years. And you looked out at that group of 100-odd people, and we are so different. You know, the 5 of us here are very, very different in working styles, backgrounds, cultures, languages, and we disagree a lot. But where we then have those disagreements, we then come together, you know, with respect, healthy challenge. So looking out of that room in Spain, just that sense of energy, unity, whilst also being very different, it really does make me feel very optimistic that it's not senior leaders just having that energy and optimism. You look out and you go, no, this is a collective where it feels like we're all standing behind something that's very exciting for the next 5 years.
So next, what's going to go wrong next?
If I can reflect on the last 5 years, which is a good news story, if you don't mind, I'm going to use one of Tony Markel's favourite phrases, which is, it's just immensely gratifying to see what we've been through the last 5 years, given everything that we've talked about and everything that we've been through. We've grown and we've produced fantastic combined ratios, and I think everyone, or most people will know, we've been through fairly favourable trading conditions in this market, but we have not been idle. We have been building teams, people, offices, products, locations, and we've absolutely taken as much advantage as we possibly can out of this market in the last 5 years, and that sets us so fairly now for the next 5 years, whatever the market brings, to keep growing. And I think we've got the tools and the people and everything else, the capabilities, one of my favourite words, to keep producing these top quartile combined ratios. So it's very exciting.
That's good. And a key addition, you talked about new leadership, but Andrew, you've been here 3.5 years. It does feel a bit longer than that. I mean, in the nicest possible way. You feel like you've been here for a good deal of time and built a stunning kind of wholesale organisation during that time, which is the kind of the bedrock, the London business, and then Asia Pacific. But it's now the mantle has passed now. So it's I think the audience and certainly me actually. What are you going to do with this organisation?
Well, and I think, just building on the themes we talked about, I mean, we've got some very strong foundations. If we go back to 2019, we were just over $1 billion in premium. We capped out last year about $2.5 billion in premium. But more importantly, think about those combined ratios that we've been talking about in the sort of low, mid-80s, culminating last year, we delivered a combined ratio of 77. Simon talked earlier over $450 million of profit on that $2.5 billion of premium. And just to recognize, Nick was Chief Underwriting Officer 3 of those 5 years. So when we talk about having all the hard questions, let's remember where the underwriting is delivered over those last 5 years. However, it's worth recognizing that with all that success, when we compare us to some of our peers, we're still relatively modest in size in international. And to Frederick's point, when we look at our market share in the markets that we play in, outside of London, where we're about 2% market share, and it'd be nice to grow that 4 if we can grow it to 4 profitably, our market share in a lot of our regions is less than 1%. So we've got a huge amounts of headroom, really, when we think about what we can do and what we can bring. And so our vision for the next 5 years is really about putting Markel on the map. And that means increasing our relevance to our customers, our brokers, our clients. It means delivering operational excellence and services to them, and really building that global franchise to become that leading specialty player in those markets and those classes that we're in. And we'll do that really with sort of 5 sort of strategic pillars. One is cultivating a people-led business, and we talked about this. We'll attract top talent, which will also attract more talent. We want people to come and build their careers here at Markel, create a legacy at Markel. We want to empower leadership. So when we bring in good people, we want to give them the decision-making authorities to go off and run their businesses. And whilst we talk about Markel on the map internationally, we recognize within those regions, if we bring in the good leaders, they'll want to do it and create their own sort of ambitions within that. So, Frederick has his sort of next dimension Europe plans in terms of how he thinks about the next 5 years. And that empowerment of leadership is important. We talk about local empowerment beats centralized genius all the time, as we've talked about through the piece. We then want to improve our ease of trading. So when brokers and clients come to us, they recognize they're having access to decision makers, the speed of response that we provide to them, the level of knowledge that we have and the way that we interact with them makes it easy for them, and they sort of see us as that go-to market. And again, we'll look at innovative ways in which we can take product to market and do that. And then we want to give our underwriters and our colleagues the tools. So we want to deliver operational excellence, and as we grow profitably, also do it as more productively. So we've been, again, investing in technology, investing in data and analytics, and as part of that, really unlock the value that we have in our colleagues so they can spend more time thinking about the profitable opportunities that we have there, to sort of grow the business. And then the final piece is really how do we promote the best of Markel. And what we mean by that is we have a huge amount of product expertise around international, huge amount of distribution expertise and technology capability. If we can bring that together, when we bring that together, we can deliver more product into the marketplace, serve more customers, and when we think about that's how we can grow, sort of into that market share. And then just, what that might mean in terms of, sort of financials, we think, and Frederick's referenced it, that we can take that sort of $2.5 billion that we finished off last year and grow that to, sort of $5 billion over the next 5 years. But more importantly, do it profitably. And more importantly, hit our sort of profit targets as we go through that piece. And as we do that, we'll kind of, attract that talent, we'll deliver on those services, and we'll really put Markel on the map. And that's what we'll look like in 2030.
I think I've picked well. I'm very happy with that. No, there's a load of themes. There's a lot of investment, a lot of focus in it, and a lot of dedication from a wide number of people to go and achieve that. We have got a few minutes left, and I just wonder if there are any questions that the audience might have for the team. There's one just down here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for all these insights. My question is, at least in the United States, there seems to be a trend of some consolidation amongst the wholesale brokers, specialty insurance. So my question is whether you have felt or anticipate feeling any negative effects of this, whether in terms of competition on pricing, terms, or otherwise, and perhaps any positive effects too.
So the question is, in the United States market, there's been a great degree of consolidation. That would be true in other markets as well. So I think that's a broader question. And would that impact the business that we have and we do in the future, I think, just to paraphrase it. Maybe Andrew will get a quick comment from you.
Yeah, well, we're seeing that, we're seeing that sort of M&A activity consolidation go out through all markets, and not just in brokers, but also in carriers as well. And particularly, as we think about the next 5 years, I think that inorganic growth, we'll see more of that in the marketplace. I think what we have noticed, particularly in the broker side, is there is still a huge plethora of brokers out there, so there's still a huge amount of choice. And certainly, when we think about our businesses, we have that kind of classic 80-20 rule. So we sort of see 80% of our business from our sort of top 20% of brokers. But there's a huge amount else there that we can do. And then particularly as we think about how we drive into local markets, that opens and unlocks, more brokers and more clients that we can do with. So I think there's plenty there for us to get on with and not sort of miss a beat in some of that M&A that's going on.
Yeah, I think there's a stat, I don't know if this is exactly true, but there's like 30,000, there were 30,000 brokers in the US market at one point of a certain size. And then all this consolidation happened, and today there's 30,000 brokers in the US market because they kind of have a habit of regrowing these people. One concern that I would say, we've seen a lot of private equity money go into that distribution landscape. And interest rates start to move around a little bit, and people have referenced interest payments become a little bit more tricky, and these people have grown an awful lot. So I don't know if it's a concern or not a concern, but I think that could have an impact on some of those businesses that might be a bit over leveraged. So we'll watch out for that. But I think for a solid company like Markel, it should bring opportunity over time. We've got another question here.
Thank you for taking my question, and thank you for your time. And I want to ask a question more on your plan on the reinsurance business and the other funding business. So Andrew mentioned you want to double your underwriting premiums over the next 5 years and do it profitably, but we've observed the reinsurance business and the other funding business margin is not improving as much as the traditional underwriting, and how much that premiums are going to go through the underwriting business, and how much of the premium go through the other reinsurance and other funding services, and how do you plan to grow the insurance segment based on different product portfolio and do it profitably? Yeah.
Gosh. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think more broadly, yes, the market is becoming a little bit more competitive, and that's probably not surprising because we're not the only ones making sort of good profits out there, particularly when we look at some of our London market peers and our European peers. However, having said that, we're still seeing good rate adequacy in the business, so we're still seeing good profitability where we can hit our sort of targets and our margins. And as we sort of project over the next 5 years, we still think we can grow profitably and hit those margins. And we're focused more on the insurance side. And the reinsurance market is certainly as buyers of reinsurance, we're sort of seeing it starting again to become a little bit more competitive, which helps us. But we, I think, have a much more longer-term view around reinsurance and reinsurance partners, and Nick can comment more on this as well, and view it as capital to help us support the business. And so we very much think about the long-term relationships that we have with those reinsurance partners, but also think about how much we can retain, because clearly when we're buying reinsurance, we are actually paying away profits to reinsurers because we expect over time that they should make money. But I think, certainly as we next look over the next 5 years, think about, again, our market share in a lot of our regions is tiny. So there's plenty of profitable opportunities out there that we can get after and still be able to grow the business and grow the business profitably. But profit is the key, and that's what drives us. And if the market does get even more competitive, well, then we won't hit that top line number, and that's fine. I mean, because the key is actually delivering on the underwriting profits.
And the question here is around reinsurance. And I suppose, I don't know if you're an investor in Markel or might want to be an investor in the future, but the way we report our insurance platform results at the moment only shows you what's happening in insurance and reinsurance. And that doesn't really shine a light as to what has been happening in the international organization that we've been describing today, our US insurance operations and the reinsurance, but you can see the reinsurance. And you're right, our performance in our reinsurance organization has been, we've lost money in several of the last few years, and that needs to improve. So the team at Global Reinsurance, as we sit here today, they have got a very clear plan as to what they need to achieve during the course of 2025. So as this group of people is talking about growth, what we're looking at there in global reinsurance is really just to focus on making that profit and getting the combined ratio under 100. But what I would like to do, and I know that Brian Costanzo, who I think I saw earlier in the audience, would like to do, is get a bit more transparent on where profits are being made within the rest of the Markel insurance organization. So you'll begin to start to see that as we go through this year and certainly into 2026. And where results aren't what they need to be, we'll have a clear line of sight as to what the next steps need to be in that area. So it's something that I've got my eye on in particular.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One more question. If not, thank you very much for bearing with us for the insurance panel. We're going to be around for the rest of the day. It's just a reminder of all the great fun things that have been happening in this organization. We have one last video to share with you to sign off, but thank you to fellow panelists. Any difficult questions in the corridor? Nick's your man. Thank you again. Run VT. All right, so my last comment was Tony, Steve, Tom, it was worth it. Thank you.
Last word.